made my first farm show in 1968, the Missouri State Fair.
And that was at that time when you went out there, you had Landoll chisel plow out at that time?
One of my local friends, he wanted a chisel plow. So he came in and he's a great entrepreneur and farmer, but we built the first chisel plow, and then I went to the Nebraska fair and found my distributor, just show, those days state fairs were big, especially Nebraska had a great state fair. And I went through trying to find somebody that might be able to sell my product, and I picked a distributor out of Kansas City, and at the time they were just losing their Fox chopper line, and they were looking for to get into some tillage. They'd been all hay equipment pretty much. So that's got in with them, and then working the shows with them, that give the opportunity to get to know fellow manufacturing salespeople, and so then those people say, hey, you need more than one distributor. I would recommend you go here. I'd recommend you go there. I'll introduce you, and that's how I got started in the network. Then of course they got me into FEMA, the Farm Equipment Manufacturers Association, and I've been a big supporter of FEMA ever since, because it's been a great part of my life as far as enhancing and finding good friends and quality manufacturers. And
personal and professional FEMA.
Correct.
Yeah. When what was the competitive landscape in that '68 period where you went out with your own chisel plow? What kind of competition did you have?
There is certainly competition is always, but it was a transition from the old mechanical pull type. There was a chisel plow made in the '40s called the Grand Homey, and Kraus. They had a simple 2-bar. These are all just 2-bar chisel plows, but them were the first years that a 3-point product was could be pulled behind the tractor without the tongue, so the mechanical lift. So that give us some help, and then it's like everything you get with companies that's got some great relationships with their dealers, and of course there's always an imbalance in dealers. Certain salesmen, handful of a minority of part of the salespeople to sell 80% of the product, and then of course you worry about why we can't sell some in the rest of the territory, and so you learn a lot about that.
Was that chisel plow the moment where you kind of really turned the corner in ag, or was there some other one that you would call that defining moment?
The chisel plow definitely, and the main reason, that's an easy answer, is in 1974. 73 actually, Case come to us. That's when people couldn't build enough farm equipment. At the time, Case had I think 152 company stores, and they were looking for somebody to build a chisel for their company stores without the Case name on it. They wanted an inexpensive, not necessarily inexpensive, but a quality product, and so they came to. I'm not sure how I heard about it that time, but anyway, I got on, I chased it down, and had 4 people come down and from Case, and at that time I was only in the engineering part of our company, so the engineer voted against letting me build their product, and the other 3 liked our enthusiasm, so they went with me on that enthusiasm, and then that went well. So then then they let me build their pull type unit, and they said, hey, your quality is good enough. We're going to put the Case name on it. We're not going to just put Liftmaster, whatever their name was. And then so then I built that product, and then that's when the subsoiler, the V plows came out, and they said, hey, we want to sell that V plow. And then the colder chisels come out, and we call ours the Soil Master. Glencoe kind of led that with the Soil Saver, but so they came and they said we want to sell that product as well. And selling through distributors, that gave me an opportunity, discount wise and everything, to work with the majors. So we were building 4 products for the case company. Good old days, getting orders by the box full. And then, for us, it was major. And then when the Case IH merger come along, like 14 years later, International had the largest tillage plant in the world up in Hamilton, Ontario. So it wasn't because of any feelings, or it's just part of life. And that's what we get dealt with day to day. And sometimes they're the good parts and some of the negative parts.
I imagine that opportunity, it made you a major player in ground engaging equipment right there, and was that the first significant manufacturing investment that you were making in your facilities?
Yeah, over and above, our chisel plows and that for the local people. And then during that time, we were, the Case had a big showing in '76 down in McAllen, Texas. And so we had our products down there, and they had dealers brought them in for about a month. And that's where I met Jerry Nussbaum, and he was with Glencoe, and they were building products. And the main reason we were building products is they didn't have adequate supply from Glencoe. And then after we got home a couple months, and the relationship we built working that show with Jerry, said, I'd rather work for you than my current company. So I hired Jerry, and that's when we started getting direct into our distributors on a pretty heavy basis. Those days distributors were big. My early days, our two bar chisel, we get up to 40 on a semi-load. Today we get 1 piece or 2 pieces. So the times have totally changed. The distributorship, and so that definitely had to grow over the years. What worked once doesn't always work. So I'm big theory, and walk before you run them, in many different directions. You want to go at it that way.
When was it clear in your mind that you had purchased this small business with your partner, and we're doing jobbing operation? When was it was clear to you that you guys were going to become a major player in ag equipment?
Well, I'm a real big believer of goals, but in my position, I feel it's very strong, or I always recommend it at tours and that we give, that set yourself attainable goals, and if you can attain that goal, then set another goal, and you continually climb the ladder, and I'm that's the theory I've used, and at that time Gilmore Tadgey was doing very well down the road from us, and their plant manager was married to a first cousin, so I had access to their shop and his knowledge after hours, and see the mistakes and the proper things they did right and wrong, but that was kind of where we got going from there. So and at that time, I guess to answer your question, Gilmore Tadgey had 200 people, and they'd sold me some of their used equipment because they updated, and I thought, man, someday I'd like to have 200 people, and so that was a great incentive.
If you could talk about some of the diversification that you've done that also allowed you to make major production investments in your facility. I know there was some outside of ag that you've done over the years. Sure,
that's something we're very proud of. And that gets back to my old saying was, quality is always a bargain. I started using that way back in the 60s, still use it. But here we were, building a quality product in the 70s, or much like the conditions we're in right now. At the end of the 70s, come to 80s, which now we're, as we go forward, we're in that same transition where that farm was so anybody could pretty much make it farming or farm equipment. But then the challenges started coming on, and that was a national thing in the early 80s. And so we had a product at the FMC Corporation, had a manager out of the Silicon Valley in California, but he grew up and was raised on a farm in southern Minnesota, and married his wife, and she wouldn't come back to the Midwest, so he was working there. But he came to Kansas City to call on TWA, And TWA said, he got a good talking to for not being able to deliver their product. And of course, that was a Silicon Valley boom super boom at that time, because they couldn't hire help, and they also built for the military. So he drove across the interstate into an implement dealership, and he said, somebody building farm equipment has got to be looking for something more to do. And so driving through the dealership, he'd seen liked our product from the window, got out and looked at our wells, and got on the phone and called me right from there. And he said, would you like to build some PCD trailers? That's the trailer they pull around under the aircraft where they're unloading aluminum containers. And I said, yeah, I'd love to, but I'm not sure we're good enough. And he said, well, you come to California, I'll show you how we do it. I'll come to Kansas and look at your facilities. And he said, and we made a great farm relationship. And he said, well, I'll do better than that. I'll spend 30 days here helping you build the prototypes, and they give me an opportunity to go see Mom on the weekends. And so that got us into FMC. And then in 4 years later, 82 or 3, they got in trouble building aircraft de-icers, and they went on strike. He called me up and said, we got 10 machines here and half built. I want to load them on a truck and send them to you. If you find a place where we can assemble them, and anything you're short, why, I'll help you get the drawing, and we'll make those parts. You got the ability to make them, and we'll get those units out the door and help us all. And I did that. And then the second year we built 16. The third year we built 42. And then the military came along and wanted 391 of them. And that was Thanksgiving of 1984. So we were successful in putting that contract together, which the single order was $43.8 million. And in a bad farm economy, that was unbelievably handy.
Yeah, but that was a couple of years after the bottom really dropped out of ag, right? And all this happened because he spotted a quality weld on a parking lot that he just happened to stop at.
So then we ended up, we did such a good job building de-icers that we won the National Award of the Year for Small Business Administration. And then when we won that national award, of course, that put us in the spotlight with the military, and got to go back to Washington, D.C. and get our awards and all, but it gives you that exposure that was so important. And then we came back home, and we was doing such a great job, as far as the industry was concerned. Great job of building the icers. So FMC said, well, you're that good at it, you build all of our commercial and your military. So then we was building commercial and military. And but we ended up building a little over 2,000 military. Started out with the 391. And then from that, everything went well until the military changed the specs. And having a great relationship with FMC, a no-compete agreement, we could see they were going kind of the wrong direction, and we had a no-compete agreement. While we had the parts business as long as we wanted it, and with 2,000 machines out there, the parts business was much bigger than building basically a prototype machine. Yeah. And then the first year after they left, the military didn't turn down the contract. They didn't buy any, so. But we were paying FMC an engineering fee, so we wasn't free to go on our own and try to come up with our product to meet their new standards. So, but that got us into the military business big time, and so since we're not many people can say, but since 1984, we've never been without a military contract up till today. So we're still, you have your ups and downs, and that's why so many people fail. In the military business, they do great for 6-8 years or whatever a contract runs out, or product, they drop a product, and if they're not diversified, they're pretty much done.
That's a great story. What could have the early 80s been for you had you not had the opportunity to get that business and make the investments? What could have the early 80s looked for you otherwise?
Well, it was obviously going to be, it was tough for all of us. I mean, anybody in the business. but I've always scratching. It's amazing how many things are out there when you get your foot under a gate that you can come up with, and that's an error which people even have find hard to believe sometimes. But in an error like that, if you got to if you can build something and break even on it, that way better than losing. So if you got break even time waiting to get into some better times, but it was tough. There's no doubt about that.
We went through some of the history here today. You guys must be the biggest, if among the biggest or the biggest short line equipment manufacturer in America, I would guess. In today's environment, knowing what you know and what you had to endure then, could it be done today?
I think it certainly could be done, but it would be a challenge. And the number one challenge is probably people. The number two challenge is insurance for those people. The day with product liability and that the way it is, you got to have a pretty good foundation to get insurance to give you product liability. So there is some major challenges where we weren't smart enough to know what them words meant, when we got started. But they're very recognizable today, and that there's lots of facilities you can get into, but it's like I said earlier, you'd have to set one goal at a time and work that direction.
And then there's regulation, which is much more stringent today, and the distribution challenges that the industry has today, right. Too, right?
Yeah, well, the large dealers and that's always been a challenge somewhat. We're still way more flexible than the majors and things like that, and it's just obvious you just don't see much tillage products in that on dealer lots right now. So everybody's expecting that instantly, and when you add that to all the different sizes, not only the multiple different products, but then they come from anything up to, in our case, 52 feet or whatever. So there is a lot of challenges, but the main thing is if we can be supportive to that dealer, get it there on a timely basis. Of course, do the guaranteed service if he's working with us, and then that all our salespeople are geared to sell quality and hands-on, setting the machines in the field. We're not only willing, we do that with many of our machines that we're out there right with alongside the salesman or dealer salesman or whoever, and that's well recognized. And then the majors, they still got to recognize that they want every farmer they can get coming into their door, and if they can't supply the product, and they can get the product from us. In a lot of cases that the major don't offer the same product. So there is certainly some support for the major allowing their dealers to handle some of our products as well.